So let's start slowly, elevating our thoughts to our Almighty Father, infinite in all his attributes, goodness, mercy, sending us permanently good spirits to assist us, to bring us the teachings, like it was the case with Jesus, with Kardec, with so many others, Chico Xavier, and also sending good spirit to assist individually each one of us. So let's be grateful for all these opportunities we have. This is why we are gathered today, is to learn, to know a little bit better about these natural laws which are governing the exchanges, interactions between the spiritual world and the material world. May we make profit as much as we can of these teachings for our individual knowledge, for our growth, for working a little bit more towards the good. And may this also, these readings, be helpful for the spirits who can be together with us following this study. So be it.
Amen.
So last week, Guilherme stopped in the introduction. In this paragraph, you must see my screen, hopefully. And again, remembering as Guilherme, don't hesitate to intervene, to raise questions, concerns, doubts. It must be an interactive, not a monologue presentation. So Kardec wrote, I think we will restart the paragraph from the beginning because we stopped in the middle. Where Kardec was writing, we already published a practical instruction manual to guide mediums, but it is now out of print. I don't know if this has been ever translated into English. It's Instruction pratique pour les manifestations spirites. I know it exists in Portuguese and in Spanish. So Kardec published it in 1858. And he published then the Mediums book in 1861, okay? And he did not reprint that book because he's explaining us it was too much but not enough, you know? It was giving a lot of hints, but maybe it was not complete enough with regards to more details and precautions and whatever. So that's why he's saying, although we printed it with an eminently serious and grave objective in mind, we will not reprint it since we did not find it complete enough to clear up all the difficulties that may be encountered. So it's exactly what I just explained. Therefore, we have replaced it with this book, in which we have gathered together all the data that extensive experience and conscientious study have enabled us to acquire. We hope that it will contribute towards showing the essentially serious character of Spiritism and also toward dissipating the idea of frivolousness and entertainment. Okay, so that first book was not, how to say, strong enough according to Kardec. And even today, there are some people questioning, no, the Mediums book should be only for initiated people, you know. And you have this type of attitude in some Spiritist groups or even federations, particularly in Brazil, saying, oh, if you want to practice mediumship, you need first to have 5 years on the theory of the philosophy itself, then 3 years of study of mediumship, and only then you can start practicing. So it's also not what Kardec was willing to do. No need of elitization of mediumship. That's the opposite. So that's why he made this book, which is a Mediums book, which is much thicker, by the way. The first one was only something like 150 pages, and the Mediums book was at least 3 or 4 times more content. with all this extensive experience that Kardec gathered in the meantime between 1858 and 1861. And he told, okay, the small booklet is now replaced by this one. But although the book is absolutely complete, and I think up to date, personally, I don't know any book on mediumship which is as comprehensive, as self-supported as the medium books. There are some complementary books on disobsession or some particular activity of mediumships which are complementing it. But I think as a base book, it's still the best one nowadays. Okay, and that's why we selected, and you agreed to study this book in particular in this session. Okay. And again, Kardec is insisting everywhere about the serious character of Spiritism. Okay, dissipating the idea of frivolousness and entertainment. Oh, I'm medium. Okay, so now I will know about the future. I will be able to tell a person details from his life and from the beloved one and whatever. Or some others are even worse. I will get the number of the lottery and whatsoever. No, that's not the purpose of Spiritism. The purpose of Spiritism and of mediumship is practice charity, is to help, and is to encourage the disinterestedness, personal disinterestedness. It's not done for putting us in evidence, and also material or financial disinterestedness, because there is no mediumship without spirits, and the credit cards are not working in the spiritual world. They don't need it at all. Okay, so how could we make money out of something which is received by the spirits, where the money has no course? If really the money is our first motivation, we are absolutely on the wrong way. Our first motivation must be, let's collaborate with all these entities, all these mentors, all these good spirits in the highest possible degree of disinterestedness. Okay. And it's also nothing for entertainment, having regular meetings and to receive beautiful drawings or beautiful messages. Okay, to do what with them? If it does not help us to become a better person, it's totally useless. So definitively mediumship is not for entertainment. Okay. Continuing, we will add one more important consideration. Meetings where experimenters are performed lightly and experiments are performed lightly and without full knowledge of the facts arose very bad impressions in novices or novices and ill-disposed individuals, and cause the problem of conveying a very wrong idea about the world of spirits, thereby encouraging ridicule and providing well-founded grounds for criticism. Okay. So this is exactly the case, what happened at that time, when there were these meetings in the Salon in Paris, social events. There was no TV, there was theater, of course, but there was no TV, no Netflix, nothing like this. There were, and the people wanted to attract to their home by the most, how to say, out of ordinary things, and amongst others, it was this table moving and so on. But it was done in such a way that the people, even coming with some serious intention to try to understand, were absolutely disappointed because the experiments were done in an absolute uncontrolled and non-serious way. Kardec himself, when he describes in what has been reported in the posthumous works how he started, was also touched by this. He saw, oh, this is very frivolous, no? And then he influenced or selected little by little the groups where the experiments were more serious, and where even the people gave him the control of the experiments, of the experiments. And this is then why he proceeded up to 2 years later, compiling the first edition of the Spirits book. Okay. So the people who go there only to see once, even journalists or whatever, are absolutely disappointed, and then make severe criticism. And they were rejecting something because of these bad first impressions they got, without having even suspecting that this something is something absolutely serious, deep, very nice and profound philosophy. Okay. And that is what Kardec is also telling, encouraging the people practicing mediumship in the most possible serious way. Okay. That is why disbelievers rarely leave such meetings convinced, and why they are little disposed or to recognizing the serious side of Spiritism. The ignorance and frivolousness of certain mediums has caused greater harm to the opinion of many people than one might think. You see, he's quite strong in this. There was one example at that time, but I'm not sure it's accessible, not even in Portuguese, much less in English. It's Mademoiselle Huet. Mademoiselle Huet was a medium. She was a rich person. They had a nice salon, was inviting a lot of very known people in her salon. I mean, salon or her home, to say better. And she was, during a certain time, participating of the society in Paris of Kardec, the Society for Spiritist, Parisian Society of Spiritist Studies. And after some times, Kardec just wrote her a letter, according to the committee of the institution, thanking her for her contribution and telling her it's not needed for you to come anymore, because she really did not promote the mediumship in the serious way as Kardec was aiming to. And then she continued practicing in her home, the Spiritist experiments. Even Camille Flammarion went there and wrote some reports on it, some minutes of what happened during the meetings. And even Mademoiselle Huet herself started publishing a magazine about the results of the experiments she was doing. But all this did not go very far. Flammarion, of course, was gathering some information and data about physical effect phenomena. But all what was then intelligence effects and things like this was somehow neglected, and that's why that initiative did not last for very long, only a couple of years after this time. Whilst Spiritism is now 160, almost 170 years later, still here. And the fact of such mediums thinking that showing phenomenon will convince the people and doing it in a very discussable and doubtful way are creating more prejudice than helping the cause. And they will, of course, bear the responsibility for this, because some people, even with good intention, can be misled and can miss the opportunity to come closer in contact with the Spiritist philosophy in their current life. So this is the responsible for this type of things are bearing the corresponding responsibility. And very frequently in the meetings we do, mediumistic meetings to help the spirits, the suffering spirits or the spirits in need, we see coming some spirits who were mediums and misused their mediumship, and coming then full of difficulties, and they are regretful for what they have done in misusing and all the consequences they have created by misusing their faculty, and also missing all the good they could have done with their faculty, in particular when they see the work we do, which is the charity work to help the spirits in need. Okay. Continuing, if you have questions, again, don't hesitate to interrupt. Spiritism has made great progress in only a few years. So from 1857 to 1861, when the book was first published. But its greatest step occurred when it entered the field of philosophy, because since then it has been appreciated by enlightened persons. See? Again, very fundamental. Phenomenon, okay, it's fine. Kardec convinced himself by seeing levitation and moving of a table, okay? But he saw immediately that, okay, that's maybe just a small trigger, but what is most important is not this, is all the consequences behind. The fact that the spirit exists, that the soul survived after the death, that the individuality is still there, that this law of cause and effect, as we just told before, the consoling power of the spiritist body of knowledge, people who lost the beloved ones and things like this, or people which were close to commit suicide and has been convinced that it was absolutely not the good way. All these good things, all these tears which have been dried up through Spiritism, that is the root cause of the popularity of Spiritism and why it is still here today. Because when we come back to the phenomenology, okay, so Flammarion told, okay, this phenomenon must be now investigated by science so that science can confirm that these phenomena are authentic and maybe progress a little bit in understanding how they work. Again, today we are 170 years later. Has science confirmed the reality of this phenomenon? Not at all, because mainstream science is still following a materialistic paradigm. And the poor guys like William Crookes or Charles Richet or so many others, even the parapsychologists like Rhin or the others, have suffered so much from her own scientific colleagues saying they get mad. This is when they go out of their area of competence, they are completely crazy and so on. They even suffered much more than ourselves, Spiritists. Because of Spiritists, we are completely mad. So for them, it's not even worth spending time with us. And whilst we are quiet like this, we can continue practicing our charity. Okay. So clearly, Kardec is absolutely right in what he's writing here, because if Spiritists would have waited the confirmation of science to start putting in practice the consequences, Spiritism would not exist anymore today either. But Spiritism is today still existing thanks to people like Chico Xavier, like all the good which has been done up to now, this consoling effect, disobsession and whatever. So this is what is really sustaining Spiritism, even without official confirmation of the science up to our current days. Nowadays, it is no longer mere entertainment, but rather a doctrine. Doctrine here, it's, let me come back to it later. Rather a doctrine that those who use to ridicule table turning no longer find amusing. Okay, so turning table is ridiculous, but the doctrine, what is the doctrine? Doctrine, it sounds in particular in French, but I think in English as well, it does not sound very good because we make the confusion between doctrine and indoctrination. which mean brainwashing or things like that. No. Doctrine, the meaning is simply it's a set of ideas that a certain persons share. That is the meaning of doctrine. So if doctrine is a problem, we can just change it into philosophy. So the Spiritist philosophy, who is now criticizing it with good arguments? Nobody. Even the scientists who are studying Spiritism or spiritualism, they always study the context, how it came, the opposition it has faced, but they never go into the philosophy itself with good arguments in order to explain where it is wrong in their opinion. I have never seen such type of critics. The only critics we see is I don't believe it, and now I reject it. Okay, fine. Everyone has his free will. Or I think it is different. This is also not an argument. It's just an opinion of someone. Demonstrate where it is wrong. Demonstrate that the soul does not exist. Demonstrate that this solidarity between the soul cannot continue after the death. This type of demonstration, they should come to show where the Spiritist philosophy is inconsistent or where there are mistakes in it. And I'm now 30 years or even almost 40 years Spiritist. I never saw any strong arguments against it. Munir.
Hi, Charles. Good morning, everyone. It's really interesting, as you mentioned, Charles, because our material science will take time to prove the phenomena that were, seen, and so Kardec, showed the strength of it through philosophy. And reading this part of the book here, it reminded me of the discovery of X-rays. When they first discovered X-rays, it became an amusement. People would take X-rays of their bones just for the fun of it. And then when they started having cancer, then they realized the danger that it posed. So only those who took it seriously for a medical purpose, and ended up showing the reality of the phenomenon and putting in the right context. And it's the same here. People saw the manifestation as amusement, and very few took it seriously. But Kardec, with his scientific approach, not that science would explain everything, but he used a scientific approach to study, and realizing that our science, material science, would take a long time to show what, or to explain what was, seen. He also developed this philosophical side, which is, as Charles mentioned, is very strong. It's strong to the point that until today, 170 years later, it withstands the arguments against it and so on.
And I think it's very interesting to study also the spiritualism, which is more in UK or in US or in Scandinavia and so on. The spiritualist movement. And when we look to it, it's interesting because they are, not all, but they are more oriented to the phenomenology itself, more than to the make use of it, disinterestedness with no money, because that is also one consequence of this phenomenology, is they are much more open to a medium becoming some salary for his work. And some are also have difficulties with the notion of reincarnation. But that is one. These three are the main differences with Spiritism, and I think that is why spiritualism also faces difficulties wherever, I mean, in US and so on. Because at the time of Kardec, it was very strong. There were more spiritualists than spiritists. And today it seems to be the opposite. There are more spiritists than spiritualists. In Brazil, for instance, the last IBGE survey, I don't know the correct word in English, or inquiry, was showing 2% or about 2%, and 2% is something like 4 million people who answered wrongly to a wrong question. What is your religion? Spiritism is not a religion, and they answered Spiritism, you know. So if we put also into the Spiritism the one which did not answer wrongly to this question, but which are also favorable to Spiritism, and all the others which are Catholic but also sympathetic and open to Spiritism, then and joining also all the other countries around the world, we reach several tens of millions. Particularly, I don't have statistics of how many spiritualists are still existing in the world. But okay, these tens of millions, when we read also, when we look to the influence, for instance, of Eurypides Barzanulf, of Chico Xavier, in the development of the Spiritism into Brazil, in Brazil, it's very clear. Some people, like a French colleague who wrote a biography of Chico Xavier, he went to Uberaba, Pedro Leopoldo, and so on to investigate and to seek for the data for his book. He even questioning the taxi driver. No, I'm evangelic. Okay, but what do you think of Chico Xavier? Chico Xavier is a man which was very good, you see. So clearly that is he's writing in his book, there is Spiritism before Chico Xavier and after Chico Xavier. It was really a game changer for the development of the Spiritism into Brazil. So, and what was the key for that is exactly what's written here, the philosophy and the ethical consequences of this philosophy. And that is really what Kardec is fostering, is encouraging in the book, and he makes it very clear since the introduction. Okay. Through our endeavors to bring it along and sustaining it on such terrain, on such mindset, we are certain to win more dedicated adherents than through a large number of manifestations, physical manifestations, that might be open to abuse. We see evidences of this every day in the number of such adherents who have resulted from simply reading the Spirit's book. Okay. So Kardec saw that already at that time. He thought might be open to abuse. So there were not so much abuse of mediumship at that time. You know, when you read the story of Zapia Palladino and all these physical effect mediums, maybe with the exception of Daniel Douglas Home, almost all of them have been caught one day or the other in fraud. And what is the reason? Because those mediums are rare, ectoplasm mediums are rare. So they were offered a lot of money by the SPR in London or by the Institut Métapsychique International in Paris or for any other entity, have them coming to them. So there was money involved. And this was the cause which induced them when the phenomenon was not happening naturally to fraud. And then, of course, again, this is harming the image because some people said, I caught him in a fraud, so he frauded all the time. And this is also wrong because some of the, most of them, like Zapia Palladino, the phenomena were authentic, at least during a certain time. And this is continuing up to today. We have a French author, I think I told you already, which wrote a book entitled in French, The Saga of Ectoplasm. So he's seeking the story of more than 150 years now of ectoplasm until today. And now that we are in the 21st century, we have means, technical means to make more serious studies about this, because ectoplasm phenomenon need most of the time a complete darkness to happen because the light or the photons are harming the production of ectoplasm. But today we have possibility of infrared apparatus, which even if without emitting any photon of infrared, they just capture the infrared natural emissions according to the temperature of what they are observing, of the physical bodies and so on. And only this is enabling them, and it has, of course, it is used in military purpose and whatsoever. You can see almost as if we would be in the full daylight. But most of the people and even the mediums are still, how to say, reluctant to have serious observation done, even with this modern means. And so after this WW2, again, the phenomena continue happening here and there in closed circles, but without any serious scientific investigation behind. So basically, what is maybe they are convincing the individuals which have the privilege to participate to these closed meetings, but they are not a lot helping in the dissemination of Spiritism, of the phenomenon itself, and even of the philosophy which comes out of it. Okay. So that's why Kardec, from the beginning, anticipating those difficulties, selected a different path. Okay, and the phenomenon is not the most important. What is the most important is what we do out of it, with it. And this is convincing more people, what he said. And some people are convinced only by reading the books. And I know also a lot of them. Of course, most of the persons suffered somehow a phenomenon or came through problems. No? They were obsession or they lost a beloved one or things like this, who brought them they had some kind of phenomenon personally or someone which is close to them, who attract their interest of that. But some others, they did not, they just were questioning and reading the books and ended up convinced just by reading the books and by the logic, the consistency, the fact that this philosophy, the Spiritist philosophy was talking to their understanding, and that was the route for to convince them. I had also, when I went back to France in the early 90s, one of the first group I met, they were practicing Ouija board and moving tables. And there was once a lady, she came also out of Brazil, and she was, no, I don't believe in such things and so on. If I would see it, maybe I would believe. Okay, you want to see it? No, there was a group practicing, so I called the responsible of the group. Oh, there is a person who would like to see. Can I invite her? Yes, yes, of course. Bring her. There is no problem. And then it was a session of moving table. I was there together also. It was the first time, the previous meeting, where I saw the table moving, but I was sure the phenomenon was happening. And also I was looking if there were some tricks or some ropes or some glue or whatever. There was absolutely nothing who could explain the movements I could observe of the table. But I was convinced before seeing. So this person came there in order to see, to be convinced. And I was also telling to them, try to do something else, maybe psychography, try to diversify. Why did you call me? I asked them. And they told us, look, because the messages we get through the table and the Ouija, we are somehow disappointed. We would like to get better messages. And then I explained, okay, but this is why maybe the mean you are using to get messages is maybe not the best one, encouraging them to change. And since that dialogue I had with them, when I was sitting on the table was not moving at all during the session. So this was always, I found it amazing. And then during that day, I always was sitting in a corner, a little bit far away from the table in order to allow the table to move. I did not do it on purpose. It was, I don't know why this happened, maybe to try to convince them or whatever. And then this person was sitting on the table. Okay. Then, Esprit, es-tu là? Spirit, are you here? And then, boom, boom. 2 hits means yes, and 1 hit means no. That was the convention for the dialogue. Okay, thank you. Today we have on the table Mr. X. Okay, go to Mr. X, and the table moving to Mr. X. Okay, come back. Was coming back. Then Y, Z. Now we have a new person here who came specifically to witness. Please move to the direction of of this lady. And then the table started to move. Yeah? And then the guy, which was responsible of the group, he was working in mining. You know, he had something like 150 kilos, arms double of mine or whatever. You know, very strong person. And then he said, okay, it's good, come back to the center. And the table did not obey, continue moving in the direction of that person. To the center, I said. The table did not obey, continuing. It shaped like this. 1 foot of the table went in between the feet of the chair where this lady was sitting. I was really like this, securing not to laugh. So nice and so authentic the phenomenon was. What do you think the result was out of it was? We asked this lady afterwards, okay, now are you convinced? No, 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 they are pushing, they are shifting, they are this, they are that. I'm not convinced. Okay, this is exactly what Kardec just explained in this paragraph of the Medium's book. Some people, you lose your time trying to convince them it's phenomenon. But the day this lady is facing a serious problem, and then when we come and help her to solve this serious problem thanks to the philosophy, that will maybe be much stronger argument to convince her than just seeing a table moving. Okay, so this is something that we should never forget. Okay. And when we come back to Jesus, you had also Thomas, what's the name of English? I think it's Thomas. He wanted to see and to touch, to believe it was really Jesus, you know. And Jesus saying, lucky the one, or blessed are the one who believe even without having seen. No? So it's exactly the same message which came back, which Kardec recalled here. Okay. After having set forth the philosophical aspects of the Spiritist science in the Spirits book, we offer in this work its practical aspect to those who wish to concern themselves with manifestations, whether on a personal basis or by observing the phenomena they are called to observe. So Kardec again very clear. The philosophical aspect is set forth in the Spirits book. So please start reading with this book in order you are aware about the philosophy, about what are the spirits, about all what's behind, and so on. And then this book comes as a complement if by knowing this philosophy you want to deal yourself with manifestations, either yourself if you want to experiment. So that is not a taboo. Kardec was never writing you should not organize sessions with moving tables. He never sold that. But do it seriously, knowing what you are doing. Okay? Because what we say to always and repeat is don't practice mediumship without the corresponding knowledge, because it can have serious inconvenience, like obsessions, for instance. If you don't know who are the spirits, what they are capable, how to attract the good ones, how to set back the bad ones, it's very dangerous. You can be misled and cheated And there are a lot of examples also since Kardec at the beginning, people very knowledge, very intelligent, who ended up completely fascinated by the spirits. Nobody is free from this danger. And only the fact to know about it, to know how to detect those things very early, and this is explained in detail in dedicated sections of the medium's book. Only with this full knowledge is that you can mitigate those risks. Okay, it's like when you drive a car. You do not put your son to drive a car and to go 10 times around the Arc de Triomphe in Paris without him having a little bit of theory, a little bit of practice. It would be very dangerous for him. It's the same for mediumship, like everything. They will see herein the obstacles that they may encounter, and they will thus have the means to avoid them. Here again, a lot of people say, okay, I read the medium's book, but I want to experiment by myself. Kardec is saying, showing the obstacles, but some people, they will not learn without suffering themselves the same obstacles, That's also something of human. A lot of people, a lot of humans want always to reinvent the wheel, Whilst it's so simple, no? He went there, he suffered this, he observed, he saw how to mitigate, he's telling us how to mitigate them. Why should I go once more through the same obstacle? If we see that Kardec is trustable, okay, let's trust to what he's saying us and save time and maybe also health, avoiding to go through the obstacles and their inconvenience ourselves. Okay, the fact of willing absolutely to go ourselves through all the experiences is a kind of I don't know form of pride that we. Pride is never good for the Spiritist experiments anyhow. Although this one follows the other, these two books are to a certain point independent of each other. But to whomever wishes to seriously delve into the subject, we recommend the Spirits book to be read first because it contains fundamental principles without which it may be difficult to understand some parts of this work. So very clear. I have no comment to add on this statement of Kardec. This second edition has been corrected very carefully by the spirits. So it was the second edition of the Medium's book had also two editions. First edition, which was 1861. Then there was a second impression of the first edition. And then there was a second edition with some revisions. You have some websites and some people in Brazil who compared now line by line what has been added and not. So you can refer to those, particularly within Kardecpedia, which gives the originals of the first and the second edition. This second edition Kardec has made the revision work together with the spirits, as it has done before the first edition of the Spirits book and also in the second edition of the Spirits book. Okay. Let me see the footnote here. Yes, okay, this is another translation note. When we use the term the spirits with a capital S, the text is referring to the group of highly evolved spirits involved in revealing the Spiritist doctrine. So it's not exactly the same as when Kardec was using the capital E for esprit. He had a slightly different meaning than what is written here, because he was using the capital letter like we use a capital letter when we put a name. For instance, Jacques, Elzoli, Pablo is with capital letter because Jacques, Elzoli, and Pablo are individualities. So Kardec was using the capital letter, for instance, saying the spirit of Saint Louis or the spirit of Chico Xavier or whoever. That was with capital letter. But when he was talking the spirit generically as the intelligent principle, he was using without capital letter. Okay, so you see it's a little bit different, the use of the capital letter by Kardec in the French original and by this translator in this version here. Okay, because even a bad spirit, the spirit of Hitler, was also with a capital letter in French. Okay, because it was the individuality. And here he's selling only to the group of highly evolved spirits. Okay, so, okay, just to clarify. Yeah? And it's important we know this to know what the translator has done in order not to be misled. Okay. It has been corrected very carefully by the spirits, who have added a large number of observations and instructions of utmost interest. Since it was they who revised the entire work, approving or modifying it as they saw fit, we can state that for the most part it is their work, since their contribution was not only limited to the segments actually signed by them. So you see, again, here's the humility of Kardec, who never presented himself as discovering again the wheel. Huh? He always said, no, the merit here is to the spirits. It's not my personal merit. And he was also even underestimating himself, because this introduction, for instance, has been written by him, not by the spirits. So today we recognize that Kardec was not just a codifier. He did more than just codify and class and compile and ordinate the teaching of the spirits. He brought also a lot of added value, which came from him, even though he was inspired by the good spirits. Okay. However, we have only indicated their names when it seemed necessary to characterize some of the more extensive expositions that proceeded from them textually. So Kardec did not put always the name of the spirits. Okay, he avoided to do it, and even less, he did not put the name of the mediums. But I think he tells also about this, exactly to avoid this inconvenience of, that is from this spirit, so I should pay more attention or whatever. No. Or it's from that medium, or even the medium himself could have been, how to say it, led to exaggerate his importance. MUNIR?
The importance of Kardec's contribution, direct contribution. And we see in the Spiritist books, there's usually in a general text, or for instance, in the Gospel, we have excerpts from the New Testament. We have the comments by the spirits, but we also have Kardec's comments, which, in my opinion, it adds a lot, because it gives perspective, like, what we human beings, reading these books and studying them, should grasp or should summarize. And he comes with the essence of the message brought by spirits. And I find that so good, so enlightening, because basically the spirits, for instance, when we have messages in the gospel from different spirits, they come and give their contribution. And sometimes they go in one direction, or another spirit goes in a slightly different direction. And I ask myself, so what shall I make of all this? And Kardec comes, as we say, surgical precision. And he puts the texts, basically, he digests them for us. That's why I see he gave a tremendous contribution as well to the work.
And he also did the selection of the messages.
Yes, yeah, on top of that.
Okay, which one is making sense, analyzing carefully, as taught in the Medium's book, by the way. So he really had, and even sometimes he modified part of the messages. So that is even being criticized sometimes. He always admitted, I make always the modification of the language, of the form, of the words, of the orthography, grammatic, whatever, because he says always, there is a medium here in between who can influence and so on. And what is important is the content, is not the form. So he also made modification in the messages. And sometimes when there was a contradiction in a message, he asked then the same question to several other spirits through several other mediums. okay, can you please clarify that point for me? And then, you know, it's the Spirit did not bring the thing ready. Now we can, for instance, make a comparison with Chico Xavier. He got also a lot of books. So those books were, how to say, brought in a much degree of completeness. Chico always said the books were always revised by the author. Even Divaldo was also always admitting this. Even when he gave some psychophony in live, when you look to the text written, the transcription of the psychography, comparing with what he said, there were also some adjustments, and he was always writing in below adjustments made by the communicating spirit during the transcription. You see. But Chico, for instance, he had a much more passive role than Kardec. I don't say he was fully passive, that's also not. But he admitted himself, for instance, with evolution in two worlds, the degree of complexity was escaping from his capacity of understanding. So in those cases, he needed to have a much more passive role than the role Kardec always had, because Kardec, the circumstances were different, the sources were not only Emmanuel or André Louis or whoever, but a lot of more spirits. So he had to ordinate and to classify and to put all those elements who came from here and there into a consistent form. Okay. Otherwise, we would not have had to mention their names on almost every page, particularly in the responses given to our question, a procedure that did not seem worthwhile to us, to having always tag the name of the spirit everywhere in the book. It is well known that names are of little importance in such matters. That's another thing he's developing in the book, in the question of identity of the spirits. What is essential is that the work as a whole corresponds to the proposed objectives. The reception given to the first edition, imperfect through that edition was, gives us hope that the present one will be no less welcomed. Okay, so first edition of the Medium's book had a lot of success, and the second edition, he was hoping that it would have the same success. And you see, 164 years later, we are still studying it. Some questions, comments? Everything clear? So let's do the last paragraph of this introduction. Even though we have added much material, including many entire chapters, we have also eliminated a few repetitious segments, such as the spirit hierarchy, which may already be found in the Spirits book and even in the Spiritist magazine. Furthermore, we have omitted from the glossary whatever did not properly fit the scope of this work and have appropriately replaced it with something more practical. Moreover, this glossary is not complete. We intend to publish one later and separately as a small dictionary of Spiritist philosophy. In this edition, however, we have preserved only new or specific words that are related to the subject at hand. So you see, coming back to this the spirit hierarchy was treated in another book, so he moved it. He had always this objective, at that time, publishing a book had some physical limits, and also in question of cost. So he wanted to preserve the volume of the book. When we compare the first edition of the Medium's book and the second one, we see that the number of pages has not increased a lot thanks to this, and it could not be much more than around 500 pages for practical reasons. and cost regions, the cost of the book himself. We saw the same into the revision of the Heaven and Hell and the Genesis, which had a lot of more discussion about it, because those revisions were published only after Kardec passed away. But the same principle was observed. Some redundancies was eliminated to make place for some new things. And he also simplified the glossary. This, of course, when we look to the glossary in the first edition and the second edition, and even the glossary in the practical instructions, the first smaller edition he made, there were much more entries than in the one we have revised together in the past week, because it's at the end of the book. Okay. And here again, Kardec had the intention to publish a glossary, but he didn't do it. He had probably no time, or the spirits thought, it's fine now, you can come back. In 1861, 31st of March, some of these projects he had stayed as projects. He never could realize them. Okay, so that's it. Some question or remark? Otherwise, I think we can stop here before starting next week with part 1. And I will hand over to Pablo, is it?
Yeah, I think Camila has her hand raised.
Yeah,
Before we
Camila,
start.
okay.
that
Sorry.
is fine. Sorry, no problem. Since we have 4 minutes, and in the beginning you were speaking about Chico Xavier, I realized that maybe because for us Brazilian, we know, right? But for who doesn't live in Brazil, doesn't have a contact in Brazil, have no idea that he was in the television when my grandpa and my grandmother in many programs, was very well respected for the Catholics, for the evangelics, for everybody. His behavior was so beyond of the imaginable that indeed the others leaders religions from other religions, let's say, they respect it too much, right? He has programs like he make questions for him. Has one case in the court, in the justice, that a psychographic letter was accepted as a proof of defense of the boy as well. That is something very incredible, right? Because it's very hard to believe on that. So yeah, I think it was a really incredible thing the judge accepted as a proof.
And that came through behavior, not through showing moving tables or things like that.
Yeah, because of the charity, right? Because
Exactly.
nobody could criticize him, right? He was very
He's a good
humble,
person.
always 24 hours of charity.
He's interested.
Yeah.
All right. So as we come to the end of our study, as we do every